morning, everyone. Welcome to Pakhuis and Zwijger. I'm going to give everyone a chance to take a seat, get comfortable. It's good to see you all here tonight. So, I will introduce myself and give people a chance to settle down. My name is Pravini Baburam, and I am your moderator for this evening. I'm very, very excited about tonight because it's the first time that Pakhuis and Zwijger and ECHO, Expertise Center for Diversity Equality, are collaborating for this event. This is the 11th edition of the Wij versus Zij series, Us versus Them. And this series is about inequality in the city and offering new perspectives on social issues. And it is a very special a week for us because we have friends from Los Angeles here. And so we figured it would be a good opportunity to engage in a conversation, to exchange experiences and ideas and perspectives and analysis so that we can learn from each other, hopefully inspire each other, and talk about what it means to have an inclusive city and the role of education. And I think we all remember Mandela's quote when he said, "Education is the most powerful weapon." And I think that is also, the weapon that we are all trying to use to contribute to a more inclusive society. The program for tonight contains all kinds of meaningful conversations. We want to make it interactive, so we really invite you to participate in the conversation. So if you want to ask questions, please raise your hand so we can give you an opportunity to speak. We'll start the evening with our friends from Los Angeles, Alfred Herrera, Santiago Bernal, and Paulina Palomino. They will offer their perspectives on the role of UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, and East LA Community College, ELAC, and share some of their frameworks, practices, and relationship with the city of Los Angeles to contribute to inclusive education. We also have students from our network who actually went to UCLA not too long ago. They just came back. So we invited them to reflect on their experience there, to make a comparison between the experiences in LA and in Amsterdam. And we have professionals from Amsterdam who are dealing with local initiatives and who are contributing here, and who offer their experiences as well. So we have different perspectives, different dimensions on the issue of social inclusion and what it means in a city like Amsterdam, a super diverse city, to prepare professionals for this society. Are educational institutions actually prepared enough for this diverse communities that they are serving? So these are the questions that we want to discuss tonight. We encourage you to participate in the conversation. I will start with our first speaker for the night, Alfred Herrera. Like I said, education is our starting point, but that also means that we have to make sure that our educational institutions are a reflection of the communities that we're serving. And so social justice is an important aspect, and that is exactly the basic principle that Alfred will elaborate on. Please give a warm welcome to Alfred Herrera.
Good evening. It's really exciting to see this incredible crowd of people here. It's beautiful because you're young and because you're the future, and it's really powerful to see so many people interested in social justice and access. As Pravini mentioned, my name is Alfred Herrera. I'm going to actually use this table because my colleagues pushed me down the stairs. I'm just kidding. You're supposed to laugh. So I actually did something coming down the stairs yesterday, and so my leg hurts, so I don't want to. I still have to venture around the city. So anyway, we're here because we're really excited and passionate about the work that we do, and we've had a very strong and important partnership with ECHO. And I want to thank Mary and Pravini for the work that they do in helping lead diversity discussions here in the Netherlands, but also because when they come to the United States and bring teams of people to talk about diversity, it makes us think about the work that we do and why it's so critical and important. Because, as you know, we're in troubled times. There are so many things that are going on with our communities here, particularly communities of color, particularly students that come from first-generation low income, that we need to provide opportunities and spaces for students to really express themselves and provide information. I come from a first-generation family. I'm the first in my family to go to college. My parents were laborers, and in the days when we called them maids, they were maids. My mother was a maid. Now they call them domestics and so on and so forth. But she basically cleaned houses for people. And so I grew up knowing that I needed to do something. But it wasn't until somebody really pulled me aside while I was in school and pushed me and talked about how important it was for me to be educated persons and to go forward. So as I worked my way through my career, it really dawned on me that the reality was we needed to do something. So let me give you some general statistics that help drive us when we look at the work that we do, and then I'll explain the work that we do in a moment. The reality is, and I just saw this 2 days ago, that California, for people under 35, the 6 out of 10 people who are under 35 are Latinos in California. Our educational system in the elementary schools all across the state, more than 50% of the kids in those schools are Latinos. And yet, the numbers of students who go on to college who are Latino are very, very small. The number of students who complete their degrees are very, very small. The numbers of students who go on to get a master's degree and a PhD are very small. So our work is really focused on how do we change that dynamic? How do we provide opportunities and support for people to really look at what's happening in our society and how we can work to change that. So the focus is really about social justice. It's really a social justice issue. When you have a group of people who are there, who are not being educated, who are sent to schools that are not preparing them for a college experience. So our role at the Center for Community College Partnerships at UCLA is really about looking at those disparities, looking at those issues, looking at those challenges, and figuring out a way that we can challenge and change those things by providing opportunities and support and preparation for people. So we operate, as I said, on a social justice framework, and we use critical race theory. And if you don't know anything about critical race theory, it's really an eye-opener because it really centers race around everything that we do. And it really focuses on why we need to make some of these changes by looking at what our institutional racism is about, what our society is about, and how people don't want to talk about race. They don't want to talk about racism. It's a hard thing to talk about. But we can talk about gender, we can talk about disabilities, but we don't talk about race. So for us, that's the central focus of what we do and why it's important. And we help students understand and to prepare how to have those kinds of conversations. Because when you're in a room with a lot of different people, it's important to have discussions that are uncomfortable because they help prepare us for the greater society and what is ahead of us. So our work is really focused about access. It's really focused on social justice. But it's really also helping students to understand why. And the reality is when you look at statistics and you look at the numbers and you realize where our disparities are, then we need to figure out how to move forward in that. So we create an opportunity and we create programs that will help students understand not only why it's important, but how to get through to become successful. Our work is focused on excellence, because too often our students and our kids come to us having been beaten down by our educational system, by having been beaten down by some of the community who say they're not good enough, who say they can't go to college, who say that they're just going to end up in some dead-end job and so forth. So our role is really to build those students up by creating a program where we call them scholars, where we talk about how important it is to see yourselves as that kind of a scholar and how important that is in terms of the work that we do. And it's grounded in the, as I said, in social justice, but it's also focused on what we call the pedagogy of excellence. And the pedagogy of excellence is basically, bottom line, it's a student's right to be in education. It's the opportunities that are created through this, focused on the excellence, focused on the opportunity, the support, and the networking that's required, because if we don't provide those, students will not succeed. It's not about survival in our world or our institutions, it's about excelling. And when you change the dynamics and you have help students think about being scholars, it changes the mindset, because for so long, as I mentioned, they've been beaten up by this institution or by these people that don't believe in them. So we create programs and opportunities. It's about how we motivate students, why it's important to motivate them, and why it's important to support them. But more than that, it's about empowering students. It's about helping them understand how to take ownership of their education. It's about helping them understand why it's important that they take ownership. And it's important that we show them how to do that by providing opportunities and networks for them to participate. And that is what we do in the sense of creating, and I don't like to say we create scholars because they're already scholars. It's a matter of showing them that they're a scholar by providing the opportunities for them to show that. So our work at UCLA is really about changing the, should I say, the complexity, I mean the diversity of the institution. And so let me just give you a little sampling of why our work is so critical at UCLA in Los Angeles. UCLA is one of the most highly selective universities in the entire country. We get, at the freshman level, for students who come right out of high school that want to go to UCLA as a freshman, we call it, over 100,000 students who apply to come to UCLA. 100,022, I think it was this year, was it? Somewhere around that, 100,000. Of that 100,000, we will admit about 11,000. Okay, 11,000 of the 100,000. We will enroll, those who actually start school will be about less than 5,000. That's at the freshman level. At the transfer level, the level that we work at, we have 22,000 students who apply. Of the 22, we will accept about 4,000, so we enroll 3,400. So it's not a challenge to get people to consider UCLA. The challenge is making sure that the people in those pools, from the applicant to the admit to the enrolled student, are diverse students. Because if we don't provide a platform and an area for them to do that, they will not be part of that, and our institutions won't reflect the diversity of our state and of our city. So our work is focused on partnering with East LA College and other colleges that you'll hear about shortly, really trying to help them understand how to get to the university, and more importantly, how to get the institution to understand why they need these students. So we work on the premise that we want to change the institution, not the student. We want institutions to understand they need to meet the students where they are and not say, oh, you poor thing, you can't come in. It's about really looking at where you are and helping you get to where you should be. And that's providing support programs. That's providing motivation. That's providing counseling. That's providing faculty of color. It's really important that as a student goes through our educational system, they see people who look like them. It's important for role modeling. It's important to show them that, yes, you too can be standing in front of that classroom or being a researcher or being a doctor, lawyer, or whatever it is that you want to be. But that won't happen if we don't allow them the opportunity to engage in the partnerships that we have. It's really important for us because we want them to explore their talents and abilities. We want to support them. We want to make sure that they get provided the opportunity to do what they want to do. And part of that has to come from them. So the empowering of the student is really the important part, because it actually challenges them to think about why they want to do it and why it's critical. When we started this work years ago, we realized that it was important to not only take the student by the hand and show them, because as a first-generation student, you have no idea what to do. But not only showing them how to do that, but also about making sure that we push them along so they can begin to walk on their own, so they can begin to really think about how to be successful at the institution. Coming back all the way down, it's about social justice. As I said at the beginning of this, access is nothing if you don't look at social justice and why it's important. For us, it's not only important, it's a passion. It's a reality. It's why we do the work we do. For us, it's not about getting students in for the good of the institution, it's for the good of society in the future. Without students of color, without some diverse students, without students who come from first generation, low income, whatever communities, we won't have the society that we should have. And so for us, it's about providing the opportunities, support, and engagement that will allow students to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred. So we have time for 2 questions. Are there people in the audience who want to take the opportunity? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about the use of critical race theory in the work you do, because I have personally never heard an admissions officer talk about critical race theory, so I'd be very interested to hear more about that.
And you still haven't, because I'm not an admissions officer, but I used to be. Actually, they should. They should. And so how many people are familiar with critical race theory here? Okay, a few. Essentially, the idea is looking at how race and institutional racism factor in the intersections of all the things that we do. So when we look at institutions and we look at what students are coming through our society and through our institutions, we're looking at how race is centered and how race is a factor in a lot of the different things. As I said earlier, people don't like to have a conversation about race, but when we look at statistics, when we look at the challenges, we look at all of the things about our institution, it really centers itself around the race issue. The fact that when you look at our numbers, African American students at UCLA represent about 5-6% of our population, yet they represent 14 or 15% of the society. Latinos represent probably 50% of the society now, yet they represent 22% at UCLA. So it really focuses on the experiences that these students have and how the institution deals with that and how we look at that to embed and teach students why it's important. When we put up the statistics, as I said earlier, and really focus on what's happening, you see that 100 students start, of 100 students that start that are Latino, by the time they get to high school, 47 of them are still there. So something's happening to our institution, to our students in these institutions. By the time they get to our institution, 7 of them. So that's a real challenge and a problem when we look at that, and we have to begin to look at what factors contribute to those challenges.
Any more questions? All right. Thank you so much, Alfred. So I realized I was so excited about this evening, I totally forgot to introduce myself, and you probably already figured out that I'm the moderator, but my name is Pravini Baburam, and I'm a program manager at ECHO. So I'm really, again, excited to be here tonight. And I will introduce our next speaker. You heard Alfred talk about the philosophy, right? The pedagogy of excellence and why it is so important to be aware of this social justice mission. But the big challenge is to translate the philosophy to practice. I think a lot of people, will agree with the idea that we need an inclusive society, that we need to make sure that we are a reflection of that society. But the real question is how? How do you do that? And someone who has experience with that and who will talk about that is Santiago Bernal. Please give a warm welcome. You may enter the stage.
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to say thank you to all the organizers of this event. It's amazing to be here in this space, first of all, and to know the legacies that this space also means beyond just what, of course, tonight is, but the legacies of the harbor that we're in, right? That where, of course, commerce took place, but also a slave trade took place as well. So acknowledging the fact that we're in this space that has a history and that nothing is ahistorical, right? That everything has a certain type of history, that everything has a certain type of context that we need to always be aware of, that we can't forget the past, because we know that not acknowledging the past is acknowledging that we will fail in the future, right? So I want to say thank you for allowing us to be in this space. It's amazing. I also want to say that I have seen my dream come true. For many years, I have talked to friends of mine about having a space that brings people from all kinds of different backgrounds to discuss issues that are important to the city. And to be in this space to discuss issues that are important to the city, to its constituents, yourselves, and that you are trying to understand all the complexities that go along with trying to create a better society for everyone. It's just a beautiful thing. So I'm just, I'm besides myself at this point. This is just awesome. So thank you so much for having us here. So I've been asked to talk about the practices, and more importantly, and I love this because I've been asked to talk about the challenges in the practices, right? Oftentimes we're asked to talk about the way that it works, and so we present how it works, and then people leave thinking that we have no challenges in putting into practice how it works. So I welcome the fact that, and I know that Pravini was being very intentional about asking us about how are those challenges, how do they manifest themselves. Yes, in the United States we have a tradition of, we have a legacy of confronting race and racism head on, because of the work that many of the people that came before us have done. So we do have the legacy of the civil rights movements in the United States that allow us to have national conversations around race. And that's great. But when it comes to then being in institutions that thinks of themselves, right? So we tell ourselves a story about ourselves, about who we are, right? And because we have had the civil rights movements, because we had Obama as a president, we tell ourselves that we are in this era of, we've gone beyond that, in this post-racial moment, right? Of course, November 9 of 2016 woke us up and told us, yes, no, we're not in that moment. And that was very telling to all of us, that we're not and the institutions are still not dealing with head-on the issues that impact us. So one of the biggest challenges in terms of putting into practice the work is that even at institutions like UCLA that have created so much new knowledge and have pioneered work in the social sciences and education, where one of the main proponents of critical race theory teaches at, we get a pushback about talking about race. That why are you here again talking about race? And why are you centering race as the point of departure for these discussions about all the other kinds of and other forms of oppression that exist, whether that's sexism, homophobia, classism, ableism, all the isms under the roof, right? Why are you still focusing the conversation on race? And the reason why we continue to do that is because you don't want to talk about it. So, and it makes you uncomfortable. And it makes me uncomfortable. It does. I mean, talking about race is something that is not the civil thing to do, right? Let's not acknowledge that we're different. That's not what we should be doing. We should acknowledge that we're all the same. But that's BS, right? We're not all the same. And that's not the problem. The problem is not that we're not all the same. The problem is how we treat those differences and the opportunities that are afforded to those who are different and the opportunities that are not afforded to those who are different. That's, I think, the challenge. It's not necessarily acknowledging the fact that we have different backgrounds, that we have different traditions and cultures, that sometimes those traditions and cultures can be in sync with the dominant culture, or that and sometimes those traditions and cultures are not necessarily in sync with the dominant culture. I think that's what we need to be talking about. How do we mediate and mitigate those differences? But if you are not able to, and if you are constantly being told, let's not talk about race, let's not talk about racism, then we can't really get to the root of the problem. So I think that's one of the challenges that we encounter often in the work that we do is being told that race and racism is something that happened in the past, and that it is something that we don't need to continue discussing because it is not the current situation. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we encounter, and that's why we're very intentional about centering our work around race and racism and making the assumption, whether that's the correct assumption, and of course that's why I said theory, right? Because it's not necessarily something that's been proven, but making the theoretical assumption that institutions are racist to begin with. So that's the assumption that we depart from, that the educational system in the United States was created not for people like us. That these institutions were created for the affluent, for the rich, for white folks, for men. And that's what they were created for. And that's not debatable. That's a fact, right? That's what it was created for. Now, of course, that has evolved and changed, but it may have evolved and changed in idea, but it may not have changed and evolved in practices and policies. And so what we have now is a different form of racism that is not the overt type of racism where, blacks keep out, Mexicans keep out, gays keep out. That's not the type of racism that we're confronting now. It is in the policies and practices that ensure that only certain kind of people, the people who have certain kind of privileges, are able to enter, and certain kind of people are not able to enter these institutions. That's the kind of racism that we need to deal with. And it's not the kind of racism, your personal biases. That's not what we're talking about. If we're talking about a systematic type of racism that including people of color uphold, that we have been so well trained in it that even as people of color, sometimes we are the ones that most uphold that type of system as well. So that's one of the challenges that we encounter. The other challenge that we encounter is being able to then move on from that conversation of race and racism to discuss all the different nuances and subtleties and different identities that intersect with race and racism. Being able to talk about gender in conjunction with race. Being able to talk about sexuality in conjunction with race. That's the other challenge that we encounter in the work that we do. And being able to be intentional then to say, we are going to talk about how men of color experience education. We are going to talk about how undocumented students experience education. We are going to talk about how women experience education. We are going to talk about how students with dependents experience education. So that's the other type of challenge that we encounter often, in that we oversimplify our identities. So if we talk about race, we can only then be, I'm a Salvadorian from the Salvadorian diaspora in the 1980s, a direct diaspora tied to the practices of the U.S. Military expansion. So I'm in the U.S. because the U.S. was in El Salvador, right? So, and this is a concept that I just learned from Stephen Smalls, who talks about Black Europe, saying that I am here because you were there, right? So it's all interconnected, right? So being able, if I say I'm Salvadorian, then I'm only that one thing. But I'm more than that. I'm also a gay man. I'm also an immigrant. I'm also bilingual. I also love the Beatles, right? So I am more than just one thing. And I think oversimplifying our identity is the other challenge that we encounter, being able to talk about these multiple identities as well. I think I have run out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Santi. I want to give you a chance to ask questions. We have room for two. I see a hand over there, and you can ask your question. I'll repeat it because people are watching with the live stream. Yeah. Go ahead.
You were telling us about implicit racism in policies and institutions. I was wondering if you could give any concrete examples of how it is.
Okay. So concrete examples of implicit racism in the institutions.
So I'll speak and this is very U.S. context, of course, right? So, for example, the exams that are used to provide access to institutions like UCLA when you're coming from high school have been shown to be culturally biased. The questions themselves have been shown to be written in a way that certain experiences are valued and others are not, right? So when you have a question in this exam that talks about if you went in a ski trip, and in the ski trip, they give you a whole story about this ski trip, and you had never been to the snow, ever, and that's never been part of your experience, you already feel a certain kind of weight about that. That's a implicit bias, right? It's not necessarily that whoever wrote these questions was being racist or intentionally wanted to keep someone else. They were writing the question from their own framework that they were using. And it doesn't mean that they were wrong for doing this, but the impact that it had on the student who didn't have that type of experience is real. Whether that person meant it or not, that's not the question. We're not questioning intentions. We're questioning the impact that that has on real outcomes.
I think
Does
it's,
that
sorry.
work? Yeah.
I think it's also because you mentioned racism, right? And I think even also in the Netherlands, when we talk about racism, we think of the KKK. Or we think of, the explicit slurs. But in fact, racism is the idea of superiority and inferiority. And it can happen in so many nuanced, implicit ways. And so having, the label of racist, no one wants that. And the conversations that we try to have is that it's not about your individual actions of being racist. It's about you being part of a system that is racist, and that by your actions you either contribute or battle that system. And the question is, how do we take our responsibility and what role do we play in changing that system? And so, when we talk about racism, it's not about the guilt question anymore, but about responsibility and the role that you play to take that responsibility. More questions. Sarah, go ahead. So what is the main reason why talking about race is still uncomfortable for many people?
I think it's exactly because of what you were just saying right now, because we make it very personal. So when we talk about race and racism and these systems of white supremacy, of white privilege, of male privilege, of heterosexual privilege, we make it, this is me, right? So therefore, you're attacking me. You're attacking who I am. You're attacking essentially who I am. But what we're not attacking those things. You know, we're attacking the framework that makes you understand the world in the way that you understand it. Because it is not our personal beliefs. Our personal beliefs don't come from out of nowhere. They just don't it's not rain that just falls and, we absorb it and it's like, I have this ideology. I have this way of thinking about the world. It doesn't happen that way. Ideologies and or beliefs are being upheld in very invisible way, right? Through the media, through what our family tell us, again, through the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are, about the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are based on stories that someone else is telling about us. So it is this systematic way of looking at the world that we don't question. But when we do question it and people hear white, then they say, okay, that's me. And you're attacking me. And you're attacking the way I believe, I see things. Or if we say, heterosexuals, we're talking about me. And therefore, I feel some kind of way about that. And I think that's the other aspect of it. That oftentimes we want to just intellectualize this kind of work. And we often are saying we have to remove the emotion out of it. We can't be emotional about these things. And, in some ways I think about this in a very gender way because we think of gender traditionally, women are emotional, right? So, I have to think about that as well, right? So why is it wrong to have emotions about these things? If you're using a certain kind of language that makes me feel some kind of way, I'm going to have some kind of emotional response to that. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being emotional. It is how you use those emotions to either construct or destroy things. I think that's what's really important. So I think it's how we personalize it, the emotional response that we have to that personalization of the issue, and being able to then think about the ways, and I have to unpack the ways in which me as a male, the privileges that I have as a man, make me have blind spots that I don't see. And I need myself to do that work, not request for women to do that work. I have to be the one doing that work to unpack my own male privilege.
Thank you so much, Santi. So we've been talking about the philosophies and how to put it into practice. And I think the people doing the work will all agree that you can't do it by yourself. You need allies, you need partners. And someone who's familiar with partnerships and how to create these alliances within the city of LA is our next speaker. Her name is Paulina. Please give a warm welcome so she can talk about the experiences of ELAC. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us and having me, and it's a great honor to be here, I have to say. I could never imagine that I would be speaking to you about change and transformation. And we have heard and we know what the topic of racism is and how it impacts our educational institutions. We see clearly that we have a problem, but now the reality is we must take action. We must own that responsibility within our spaces and lead in one form or another. What I have learned about creating opportunities for diverse student populations has been that, yes, it has been uncomfortable to come forward and speak in public spaces about the challenges, but the reality is, especially in education, many of our faculty, all of our staff, all of our leaders, we have very altruistic goals, and this is why we are in these professions, these careers, and these institutions. And so how is it that we start developing those spaces for having these conversations, and better than that, how is it that we create plans and programs and services to implement in order to address those challenges that we all know that exist? At my campus, East Los Angeles College, we serve 30,000 students. 70% of those students are Latino students. About 90% of them, no, above 90% of them live below the poverty line and come from very underserved communities and educational systems. And so even though East LA College was one of the centers of affirmative action in the late 60s and in the 70s, and we were championing the cause, and our very own students were out marching in order to create change and to create opportunity and access. 50 years, some years later, we are still having an equity gap in actually creating and transitioning students, Latino students, students of color, into universities like UCLA and others across the nation. So what tools, well, within the institution, we all have a framework within our institution of governance. We have committees. We have, I'm sure you know, faculty champions, staff champions, administrators that are with you on the mission, but how is it that you bring it forward? One of the biggest and most empowering things is to use data. We used data, we looked at the data in order to see that there was a huge disparity in sending our students to university and transferring them out. And so what we did is we used the data, and our leaders, our very own leaders, our president of East LA College, our chancellor of UCLA, came together and created a task force. So it came from the top. But did it clearly come from the top? Well, not necessarily. We needed people like Alfred, like Santi, like myself, like others across the institution to say, hey, we have an issue here. We have a challenge here. We took the data to different committees throughout the campus. We took the data to our political leaders in the community. We took the data to our K through 12 leaders in the community and started having these conversations. The leaders of UCLA, of East LA College, came together and created a task force. And we invited everyone, community members, students, faculty, staff, administration. And we started talking about some of the great work we were doing and some of the not so great work that we were doing. And we made it collectively a priority to actually address the challenges of the students and of ourselves as an institution and how we were not addressing the needs. And so in doing that and in partnering with UCLA, we became really strong allies. We were able to leverage funding resources to make it work. But you see, you become an advocate. You have to go around and actually engage all different stakeholders make the commitment their own, our own, collectively, and then include them in every step of the process, including the celebration of every milestone that is met. Everyone wants to be a part of something great, right? And so this is the approach that we took in order to get things done. In California, we have 114 community colleges, and just a few years ago, our transfer numbers ranked in the low 30s, 40s to the UC system and to the Cal State system. And within about 5 years, we have moved all the way up to number 5 for the Cal State University system, very much like the applied science system, and number 13 for the UC system, which is absolutely amazing. And it has taken a lot of risk-taking. In leadership, there's this little video I've seen before where there's the lone nut who sees the problem and gets out there and starts acting toward a solution. And then we have the first followers, so you start beginning to build an alliance, a coalition. This is an alliance here. This is a coalition. And so then you start bringing others along. But then, on top of that, you have to create very strategic plans to create change within your community. So whether it's in your classroom, whether it's in your institution, proposing a new class, where is my, oh, there we go. Caribbean African Studies. Afro-Dutch Studies, I'm so sorry. So that is new. That is new. If things don't change, if things hadn't changed, I wouldn't even be here. I wouldn't have had access to college. I wouldn't be a working woman. I wouldn't be able to vote. So many things, but it's up to us to determine and to actually create the change. We are the change, whether it's in the classroom, your institution, at work, whatever you do, wherever you go, it is our action. And obviously our inaction makes us part of the challenge. So we must take action. So a lot has been done in a very short time. We've been able to find funding resources. We have been able to actually have more faculty and staff and diversity within our institution, and that work continues. And it continues, and the model has been looked at nationally and even internationally, and that is just amazing. But it takes a lot of commitment. It is our moral purpose. It is our mission to make sure that those opportunities are created, but it takes a lot of planning. Think about your role, your institution, what governance is in place, who the leaders are in your region, and get out there and do the work. Start a club. With all of that being said, the work continues. It hasn't ended. We still need to improve. We still need to grow. We still need to create more and more opportunities. And that's why we are here.
Thank you, Paulina. I'll give the audience a chance to ask questions. Anyone? Yes, go ahead.
So you said that there was this big change in the space of 5 years, and you also mentioned the fact that you had to take a lot of risks. So what were your shortcomings before? So what are the improvements that you made, and what are the risks, or the biggest risks that you think were taken to make this improvement? And it's sort of a two-part question.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you mentioned funding. How is that funding then used to aid you in this process?
So the first question is, what is the progress that you've made, and what were the risks that were taken? And the second question is, how was the funding used? Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so a risk, even for me, is to speak to you here publicly. I prefer to be behind the scenes in creating and developing and bringing others along to start these services and support systems for students and individuals. Attending committees, speaking to leaders, getting out there and getting the message out, it is not always welcome. So that's a risk. That is certainly a risk. Having those courageous conversations, especially with leaders that don't necessarily want to address some of the challenges that we might have. But that's why I say, altruism, the desire to do something good for everyone is the main, what I see in people. That's what they want. That's the desire. There's also a benefit factor, which you can sell, which is, if I'm the president of the college and I have great improvements, my institution can shine, and therefore my work shines, right? And so sometimes things have to be framed in a way that is meaningful to all stakeholders. For example, I said that every time there's a milestone that's met, there's a celebration, right? But we don't forget those who have been involved collectively in the work. At our school, we have a transfer student reception. When I started having that reception, there were maybe 30 people who would show up and participate. That was the first year. But now we had over 1,000 people attending and participating. And what I do is we make sure that faculty are involved. Students get to nominate faculty that have been influential. So involving and engaging the stakeholders in every part of the process and making it meaningful to them, because they too want to celebrate success, is incredibly important. In terms of when you start having some success, then the supports keep coming. So whether it is from the institution itself and it becomes a priority, or whether we can find funding from outside sources, we actually have some funding from the state of California, designated specifically to close equity gaps, then that is where the resources come from. And so it takes some looking within your institutions to see what there might be available.
Thank you. Any more questions? I actually have another question, Pauline.
Okay.
So, because I was also intrigued by the risk comment that you made,
Yes.
because I think in the Dutch context, a lot of people also feel that risk. And so it sometimes holds us back from speaking up.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned also that you really don't see an option in not speaking, because then you maintain the system. How do you empower people to speak up?
So number one is there are different avenues. Professional development, bringing a special lecturer, maybe on critical race theory. Some universities have one book, one college, right?
I'm not familiar with that, so maybe you can
Okay.
elaborate.
So it's where a university would select one piece of literature where the whole campus is reading it and having a dialogue and conversation for the academic year.
And what were some of the books? Can you remember?
Oh, gosh, off the top of my head. Not at this time. I'm so sorry.
We'll get back to that maybe later on.
But the literature that you use can be incredibly powerful to start getting people to think from a different lens, that and hopefully move and change people in a direction that we would like to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Empower people.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
so
very-
empowering, having maybe creating a club, developing a committee to address some of the challenges on the campus and participating, the student voices. It goes on and on and on. Just look around within your spaces and see where you can start voicing and leading some of the work.
Okay. Thank you so much. Please, another round of applause for our speakers from Los Angeles. So, please go ahead. We're going to continue the conversation at the table. Because we talked about, Paulina already mentioned, celebrate success. And one of the things that we do as ECHO is indeed celebrate success. Every year with the ECHO Award, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a prize for students of color in higher education. And the prize that they win is a summer course at UCLA. So 2 of the students who won in the previous years are students who have gone to UCLA this year. I want to invite them to join me here, Khaled Tamimi and Anita Abaisa. Yes, please join me. You can have something to drink if you want. So I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself for the audience. And let us know when you got back, because you just got back like a few weeks ago, I think.
We got back on the 10th, I think, 11th, something like that.
September, yeah.
Week later.
Week later, okay. Yeah.
So Khaled, please introduce
So
yourself.
I'll introduce myself first. I'm Khaled Tamimi, as it says on the presentation. I'm a recent graduate of Amsterdam University College, where I studied physics and mathematics. I'm obviously an ECHO ambassador and winner of last year, and I went to LA past summer. And I work at Stichting Diversity, which is a non-profit organization where we design applied diversity policies for higher education. Essentially, we sort of try to bridge between communities in Amsterdam and the higher education institutions in Amsterdam. That's basically it.
Thank you. Anita?
Yes, my name is Anita Baisa. Well, I'm the founder of Black Ladies Talk. That's one of my roles in life. And I'm also a part-time student at the HVA. And there I'm studying psychology, applied psychology. And tomorrow in the morning, I'm a learning expert. So yeah, that's one of my few roles. And so yeah, what I was saying, I'm the founder of Black Ladies Talk. And Black Ladies Talk is, I think it's the biggest network for Black women in Europe. And it's about, nowadays we've got like 8 groups with 30,000 ladies from the Netherlands and Caribbeans, all Dutch speakers. And well, that's also the reason why I won the ECHO Award in 2016.
Great. And you just got back. You also just heard our friends from LA. Did you recognize the experiences as a student?
There's one particular thing that I recognized almost immediately. I think Mr. Herrera talked about that. He talked about how like the society is obviously divided up in some way, but the community at the university is not divided in the same way, so it's not representative for the society in LA at least, or in California maybe even. And the thing, what I found interesting, which is like a strong difference to my opinion between the Dutch and United States context, is that in the United States, at least to my opinion from the 6 weeks I've been there, which is obviously not representative, I found that UCLA in particular, they try to engage with the community, they try to sort of give back to the community, but they are a segregated community. They are like a very different identity. They are located in what I think is one of the poshy neighborhoods of LA, very much segregated from all the other parts and all the other communities of Los Angeles, and that was in particular like surprising. I thought that, or I expected actually that UCLA would be so much integrated in the society in Los Angeles, but this was less the case because it was so like segregated, individual. It was like interacting with the community of Los Angeles, but it was a totally different identity by itself. It was like almost an ivory tower, like relating back to the description of this event. So that was particularly like surprising for me, and relating as well to Herrera's talk.
Do you recognize that, Anita?
Yes, of course. I did recognize it because, well, when you got out of the campus, yeah, you find yourself in Beverly Hills, like and Hollywood. So it was really strange to be there. But I think the most important thing is the connection between the university with the college in California. It's so strong, and I think it's a very good example for us here in the Netherlands to arrange our systems.
So what are the lessons that you feel we can learn from that U.S.
I think it's the connection, and this task force of these three very passionately people who work every day to arrange these kind of connections, and who go into these conversations every day, and not always having the most popular conversation, because that's what it's all about. It's also here in the Netherlands. It's the things we're doing also for ECHO. It's not having the popular conversation. It's having the very difficult conversation, and I think especially in the Netherlands. And I was very surprised when I got there by the idea of the students. They all were like, "Well, but the Netherlands, it's so free and it's fantastic, and there's no racism in Holland." So I was like, "What?" So you see, that's this. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's the media, or maybe it's because people are very unknown with the Netherlands. But I do think we. When I look to the US and when I look to California, we are able to learn because they did make more progress than we do. And I think, so for that part, I think they are further with that. And I think we really should start and come to action and really start doing things. Because, well, there's a little bit of talking, and yeah, just like I said, having this unpopular conversation, it's just the beginning, and now we really need action. And I do know a lot of people who are trying and doing their best, but I do really find it really hard in the Netherlands. Yeah.
Khaled, what are your observations, lessons learned from UCLA?
Lessons learned from UCLA. I think that something which I liked about UCLA, but I can't really answer whether that's a lesson learned because my alma mater, Amsterdam University College, sort of approaches it in the same way, is that especially, or at least at UCLA, but probably more generally in the United States as well, I feel like academics are approached more holistically. It's less about just educating good minds, but it's also about educating good bodies and educating good citizens. One of my friends at UCLA, Jacoby, he used to articulate it as our motto is good mind, good body, good citizenship. I like that motto a lot. I see similarities with that at my alma mater, Amsterdam University College, but less at the University of Amsterdam, for example, where I feel that the university perceives its responsibility only to educate within a certain subject, and not necessarily teach about moral ethics or about health benefits and stuff like that. I think that was definitely a lesson. A different lesson was also something which I only found out in the last 2 weeks in my trip in LA. So this was also mentioned in the description of the event today. You can get acknowledgement or recognition for some civic engagement or community engagement. I had to do that as well as part of my graduation requirement. But the way they did it, or at least the way I learned about the last few weeks at UCLA, was that they don't do it only once. They don't do just the initial engagement, but they start with engagement. They follow it up by engagement and theory, sometimes even engagement and research afterwards, and cultivating with engagement and design, innovation. They start experiencing this engagement themselves, learning the theory. So it's a mix of theory and praxis, ending up in experiential learning, which I think is the key to civic engagement, at least from a university perspective. That was definitely a lesson taught to me by UCLA. But another lesson was that maybe that's rather a lesson of appreciating our context here in the Netherlands. I feel like in the United States, but I can't say that so generally, so let's just focus at UCLA. I feel that they're very much focusing on giving something back to the community, rather than focusing on making the university itself accessible to the community. You can see this by like segregating the entire campus on like some poshy neighborhood in LA. That's one example of it. I feel in the Netherlands, when we make or do some diversity efforts, we often focus more on making it accessible for everyone. The United States is in this context obviously like radically different. A simple example would also be like the cost of studying. Obviously, UCLA is a public university, and obviously I think a lot of people know that tuition fees are extremely high in the United States. But even at UCLA, being a public university, I might be wrong, so don't take me on the numbers. I think it's like $30,000 for California residents and $41,000 for non-California residents. And this makes it sort of rather the exception that the average American student goes to UCLA rather than the norm. And I think that's something that I learned to appreciate about the Netherlands or the Dutch context here. Yeah, I think that's it, at least what I can come up with right now. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, go ahead. I saw it. I want to give you all an opportunity to ask questions. So Max is walking around with the mic. So I have to look around. Anyone? Are you shy? Or just like really inspired and taking it all in? Go ahead, I see someone over there.
So I have a question for you. I forgot your name, I'm sorry.
Anita.
Hmm?
Anita.
Anita. So you're the founder of Black Ladies Talk, right?
Yes.
And I was wondering, because we've been talking about inclusivity and diversity and equality for everyone. So don't you think Black Ladies Talk is a bit divisive in that way because it's only for black ladies? It seems a bit strange to me, actually.
Well, I think it's a very good question because I do get it very often, and the thought behind Black Ladies Talk is it's raising the socioeconomic status for the black women in society. I don't know if you're famous with the numbers, but it's really problematic. And so it seems like it's, yes, the community is only for black ladies, but there's also a thing between black ladies and connection. And my goal is to connect these ladies to each other. But it doesn't mean they can't connect with other people. The idea is creating our network, and from that network on, learn from each other. And from that learning on, connect also with other people. For me, example, I connect with everyone. Also, when I'm doing like my events, I just, sometimes they're only for black ladies, but sometimes they're also for black ladies and other people. So it might seem that it's only for black ladies, but the thing is, it's focused on black ladies to give them a better life. That's what it's all about. But it doesn't mean we're not connecting with other people.
I need to follow up on your answer because I am familiar, with isn't it also a safe space where you are able to discuss issues that you wouldn't be able to discuss if it wasn't just that space of people who share the same background and experience?
Yes, it is. It is a safe space for us, online and offline, to talk everything. All kind of topics. The thing is, it's very simple actually. When you're putting black ladies together, the whole dynamic and the subjects are totally different. You can finally talk free. You can finally talk about your real experiences, and those are not. It's like having this the difficult conversation, but then with like-minded people, and it's very important for us. And a very simple thing: it's very important for us to know that we're not crazy, because we're experiencing things. Sometimes you're like, "Am I crazy or what? This is madness." But am I the only one seeing this? And when I started this 3 years ago, I finally found out that I was not crazy.
It took a while. So we have room for one more question. Alfred. Oh, wait, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, in the back.
It's not really a question, just like a follow-up on the question you had. Maybe it helps to compare to like the LGBTQ community. So when you create these communities, doesn't mean you're diminishing like the rights of the people that don't belong to the community. Like Black Lives Matter doesn't mean that not all lives matter, for example. Or like LGBTQ doesn't mean that heterosexuals don't matter. It just means that you want to create a space where these people feel like safe, and where these people feel safe to share these stories that they have, which other people might not be able to connect with easily. So just wanted to say that.
Oh, so you just said what Alfred wanted to say, so so we're good. Okay, so any more questions? See, we're just getting started. So, over there. Oh.
First of all, congratulations to both of you for winning the award, and it's really inspirational to hear about your work. I wanted to ask you how conversations surrounding race compares in the Netherlands compared to in the States, in college campus environment?
Anyone? So first of all, I find it really hard to answer that question. I feel like 6 weeks in the United States at only one university, which is in a city which is already not that representative of the United States. So I'll just focus on UCLA. I feel like the discussion is more established in the United States, but it's still less comfortable. But that's only my experience. I have a small anecdote about this. I was explaining a friend of mine, Jacoby, about quantum physics. Don't ask me why. And we walked past this guy, and then he heard us talking about something called entanglement. And then he commented about it, and he was like, "Really? Is that really true?" So we started talking to this guy, and he was a painter at UCLA. And he was telling me about his workday after talking to him for half an hour or 40 minutes, maybe even. He started telling us about his workday at UCLA. He had to paint some office or something, and he was working with a guy of color. And he told me that it was the first day that he was working with that person, but he could really sense that that guy was uncomfortable. He was uncomfortable about something. And he kept asking him, what's bothering you? What's the problem? What's going on? Why are you so annoyed, so irritated, so frustrated? And then this guy at some point said, "Don't you notice I'm black?" And he was like, "Yeah, what the hell? I'm Latino." And he was like, "No, I'm on the UCLA campus. I don't belong here. I'm black." And this guy told him, "Yeah, but our superiors are very open to talk about this sort of uncomfortable feeling. Why don't you raise the issue?" And he was like, "I don't feel comfortable to raise that issue at all, because this is a campus close to Beverly Hills, as I already mentioned. It's not my neighborhood. It's not my kind of people. It's not the way of thinking that I'm used to. So I won't go into that conversation. I won't take on that confrontation." I feel that would be less apparent here in the Netherlands, but that's again only my experience. So that's that, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you have any additional comments, Anita, before we wrap up?
Well, yes, I do agree that it's very uncomfortable, because I did remind my social psychology course, and one part of it is discrimination, stereotype, and everything. And I was really looking forward to that college, but then it was over in 1 hour. So it's this topic you're looking really forward to having this conversation about it in the US at UCLA, and because I was probably a little bit biased. I think oh yes, now we're gonna have the conversation, but then it didn't really happen. So I was like, oh wow, it's this tiny thing that's just it's gone. So I was really surprised by that, and I was like, oh wow, and it did felt uncomfortable also. So I was really surprised by that, actually.
So it actually mirrors the experiences of the fellow students who think in the Netherlands it's all easy, and and then it turns out that you have the same experience in the US.
Yeah, it's not that different from Holland. I think my lesson in Holland was the same, so it wasn't that much different at that point. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're out of time. I wish we could continue the conversation, but I encourage everyone to continue the conversation afterwards if you have any more questions. Thank you so much, Khaled and Anita.
Thank you.
Can I get another round of applause? Thank you. So we started in LA, and then we traveled from LA to Amsterdam. And now we'll focus a little bit more on the context of Amsterdam, the Dutch context, and people who are doing the work here. And I'm going to invite our panel members, and what we're going to do is every panel member has 5 minutes to present the work that they're doing, and then they'll join me here at the table for a talk, and then we'll continue the conversation with you again. So I will start with our first speaker from Amsterdam United. Tuba is Tamir. You can grab a mic over there. And Tuba is of the Student Association Amsterdam United. You will tell us all about it. Yeah. Give a round of applause for Tuba. Oh, you got a fan club over here.
By the way, I brought my board, so they're all the way over there. That's my board. It's the new board of 2018 and 19. So before I start, I do want to say that, yeah, thanks, Max. Great, yeah. I'm the chair of Amsterdam United, and I've been chairing it for a couple of years. I've been on the board for 4 years. So actually, like, I'm stuck to this board, but for a good reason, I would say. I found this board, Amsterdam United, not because I looked for it, but it was a coincidence. So I studied English at the University of Amsterdam, and I studied sociology. And when I was studying, you know, you have to give a lot of speeches in class because you have to practice rhetorics or you have to practice argumentation theories. And I was like giving a speech in class because we were graded for it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick a topic which is really concerning me because I wanna like pinch my students, my fellow students, so they could refer to me. So I was talking about the gay rights in Istanbul, the gay rights in Amsterdam, how I had to develop my own queer identity while coming from certain areas or from a neighborhood or from a community. I'm Turkish Dutch, and it has its own challenges with it. So I was talking, and I gave a speech, and it was done. And then your fellow students, they come to you, they want to compliment you, and you do accept those compliments, but something is stabbing me as well, because the compliments are based on, wow, you're Turkish, but you're so open-minded. And actually, you're a better Turkish person because you're gay, and that's even better. And look, these types of compliments, and I know my fellow students, they didn't mean it in a bad way, good intentions, nice students, but I said, thank you, I was 20 years old, and still something is stabbing me, something is stabbing me. I was like, I have no terminology in my hands, I have no anything in my hands, no tool to address this. So I can say, hey, actually I don't like what you say, but I can never justify why. Until I started studying sociology. Then everything fell down, so I was so happy. So then I learned about microaggressions. I learned about the underlayers of giving a compliment which is not really a compliment. I learned about institutionalized racism. I read about biases that you have as, you know, passing as straight, because I can pass as straight and I do know that's a privilege. I read all these terminologies, I studied everything, and my thesis was actually about my identity but then performed on others. So I could dive deeper into myself. And then I bumped into Amsterdam United. So I found them, I found an event, I found a debate. I was like, that's a super interesting topic, I'm just gonna go. I found the people, I was on stage, I talked to them. I was like, this is Amsterdam United, this is what they do. They are usually like creating debates and events, and they pinch everyone in the audience, they pinch their friends, because they will be in your face and ask questions. So I was so happy, and I tried to sign up an email like, hey, can I be part of the board, please? And I got a reply. I had a job interview with the teachers, and then I was in a board, and this was like years ago, imagine. Because I think we exist for 6 years right now. And so I was in the board, and now I'm chairing it. And what we do is, we really want to take it, instead of only having debates and events in which I already know that like-minded people will show up and like-minded teachers will show up. I was like, what if I push the institutions and the president of the institution? What if I push them? What will happen then? Maybe something else will drop down. Now we pushed it, and actually, I'm so glad we have so many things coming up. And when I leave the board as a chair, I know it's in good hands, because we recruited so many good students and so many bright students, and I need their brightness before I step down, and I'm still here. And I'm so proud because, you know, just one example, Fatima, she created together with us, together with all the other board members, we created like academic diversity programs. Those are all mentor programs. One mentor program is within the university. How can we guide first generation students? That's only the UVA. The second program is how can we support HVA students who want to stack up towards university? Those are stacking students and they should be welcomed, they should be guided. That's number 2. Then we have the mentor program reaching to high schools because we know that the university that I'm at, University of Amsterdam, they do not show off to all the high schools. They cherry pick high schools and then they go promoting UVA. They leave specific high schools behind. We want to connect to them and we want to drag them in. If the UVA doesn't do that, we will do that. So we have our pioneers and we have our students and teachers who will guide us in that. And then we have Rio de Janeiro, which we do research with. The university we're connected to is UERJ in Rio de Janeiro, it's the state university. And we work with them because we want to see how they were diversifying their curricula, because we not really copying it because the context is different, but we want to see how they did it. Because now we're working at the UVA with the teacher education department. So imagine students, they want to become the teacher at the primary school. So that's a pretty long road, I would say, and you have to be equipped for that. We have, when we measured the income, I would say, a lot of bright, white, female students, but they do want to work as a primary teacher at the colored neighborhoods of Amsterdam and the super diverse big primary schools in Amsterdam. You need equipments and tools for that. So we were teaching them or kind of challenging them in anti-racist literature, and we were just measuring how they would view that and see that. We have data collections and we have papers and we have a whole setup program that they need to take as an mandatory course, not an elective, but mandatory course. I got 1 minute and I will use that minute. Thank you. Thank you, Max. But then again, I can elaborate on this research later when I'm at the table, but I'm not sure how I can elaborate on all of them, but so many things are going on. I'm so happy with this new board because I know that when I started with Amsterdam United, we only had events and debates, and those were enough back in the days when I was a teenager, but I'm growing up and I'm actually sick and tired of only doing event and debates. So I was like, what with the institution? I need to press it, I need to change it, but then I need to have more people next to me as allies. And we recruited those. One of the most important one is Anne Graaf. She's with us and we are with you. And I'm just looking forward what Amsterdam United can do more than only these 5, 6 points. I want like 25, 35, 100 points. But that's up for you. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So please join me here, yes. And then we'll invite the next speaker before we continue the conversation. You talk about institutional change, and someone who has made waves with that is our next speaker, Saudi. There you are, Sandvliet. When we talk about institutional change, we also have to talk about the curriculum, right? We talk about what are the voices and what are the stories that our students hear. And Paulina already mentioned it. Saudi has set up a Afro-Dutch studies. So I invite you to enter the stage and tell us more about your new initiative.
So this is uncomfortable. So I have to talk about my course. I'm going to talk about the competition I was in, what the course is, and what it means for the city of Amsterdam, and how I came up with the idea of this course. So last year I was enrolled in the master's program to become a social science teacher. I recently graduated. Thank you. So last year I was walking around the campus and I saw this sign, Create Your Own Course Challenge, and I applied with this idea to develop a course called Afro-Dutch Studies, Afro-Nederlandse Studies in the Netherlands. And I didn't win with the Create Your Own Course Challenge. That was from the interdisciplinary department, but a week later or a month later I got an email from the faculty of the Department of Humanities, and they said, hey, we also want to look at your idea, and they did, and I won. So they said, okay, this was March, I think, and I said, okay, from now on you can start developing your course. The course will run today. It will start in 4 weeks, exactly from today on. So that's the first lecture. But what is Afro-Dutch Studies? Afro-Dutch Studies is an interdisciplinary course that focuses on the history and present-day situation of people of African descent in the Netherlands. It's interdisciplinary, so we'll focus on history, but also sociology, culture, and it's also open to. It was open to students from different programs. So we'll have. I already saw one guy. He's from the AMFI, the Amsterdam Mode and Fashion Institute. That's going to be great conversations. How did I come up with this idea? So I studied sociology at Amsterdam as well, the UvA. And in my last year, I applied for a scholarship to study African American studies in the Netherlands. I did this because I was missing something out growing up in the Netherlands, a different perspective, and I did find that at BU, Boston University. So this course is also, I should say this differently. African American studies serves as a model for this course. Should I tell more about this story, about the approach? Yeah, but okay. So I have 7 weeks. We'll start with pre-colonial Africa. Then we'll go into the transatlantic slavery, slave trade, and enslavement of African people. Then we'll go into the post-colonial period. After that, we'll talk about migration, and then we're going to have like I call this the present, and we're going to do some literature. 1 minute? Oh my God! Okay. And then we're going to talk about critical race. We're going to have concepts. So what does this mean for the city of Amsterdam? So I'm a community member of Amsterdam. I'm not in the university. I'm a student. Actually, I graduated. So I think. This is already an initiative from within from the community, right? Another thing, I'm going to have 35 students who are going to read, write, and do research with me, and they're going to take all of this knowledge and they're going to use this in their professional life and in their personal life. And I also wanted to do something back for the community. So the last seminar will be at the Bijlmer Park Theater. And that's going to be the 13th of December. I'm shamelessly plugging an event here. And the students can, it's going to be a mini conference. So the 35 students will present their work for the community. So please come out.
Thank you so much, Saudi. Please join the table, and then we'll invite our last speakers for the table. We talk about institutional change and about how we need to prepare our students for this city that they'll be working in, for this diverse society. And our next speakers are very consciously making the effort to link the institution and the education with the professional context that they'll be working in. Sameya Buhahu and Mauti Awonu, please, hand. And let us know what you're up to.
Okay, we're scared because we like to talk and we only have 5 minutes.
That's
people
the
who
biggest
know
challenge
us,
ever. Yeah.
So that's why we have notes, because we want to be strict and we want to get to the point. Yeah, I get this one because we made a little presentation. Yeah, we started at the bottom, and for us, at the bottom was in 2013. And in 2013, we didn't have any funds. We didn't have any team. We didn't have extra hours. We just had a goal. And the goal was to listen to our students. That was very important. We work at the University of Applied Science in Amsterdam at the Bachelor of Social Work, the HVA. And what we saw, that was an environment that wasn't really inclusive and didn't talk about issues that were going on. And in 2013, as you all remember, was a big change in Europe to talk about identity because of the attacks in Paris. And there were a lot of conversation about religion, about identity, about who belongs to, in this society. And that was a conversation that was going on in society, and we also needed to have that conversation in class. And what we saw is that staff and teachers and the department was really scared to talk about that. And we thought, well, we need to have a conversation because also university is a place where you can develop your opinion in a safe environment. So what did we do? We started with students. That they are very important to us. So we created an event and it's called Social Harmony to talk about these issues. And there were like 150 students that were coming. And a lot of people said, hey, how did you do that? Did they get money? We said, no, they didn't get money. Did they get credit points? No, they didn't get any credit points. They came in their own time, in their own hour, because we gave them a voice. That was very important to us, to let the students tell their stories. So what I want to do is to ask all the students of CMV who are here tonight to stand up and show yourself. Yes. So nice to see them all here because, this is our students we are working with, and we find it very important that they can show themselves and tell their stories and speak up. What happened? A couple years later, we organized 5 big events and 5 small events. We did peer learning activities about social justice issues like racism and gender. And what you saw in 2017, that there was a hype going on, diversity hype, inclusion hype. Everybody was talking about it, and people also took ownership about these conversations. But what we saw in our institute, that there were platforms and people are really taking the regie of it, ownership of the conversation. And what we saw is that the debate was soft and they were sugarcoating the issues that were really important. And we thought, no, this is not going to happen. We should ring the alarm because something is going on. There are problems that we are facing and there are facts that are really, really hard and that are obstacles for our students that they can't have any study success. So what was going on? Increasing dropout rates for first-generation students and students with migration backgrounds. Students who were missing a sense of belonging, students who were missing diverse curriculum, talking about social justice topics, students facing racial inequality in the classrooms, and there was a lack of cultural diversity in our staff and in our team. This is not a representation of the HVA, not at all. Language and knowledge within the professor to talk about social injustice topics as racism were not available, and this is what we wanted to say, so we rang the alarm. Dear White HVA. This was an event that we did in December 2017, and we did it with 30 students and also with our curriculum manager.
Program manager.
Program manager, thank you. And I think this says it all. We said, dear White HVA, listen, because there are obstacles and there are problems and we need to talk about it. So we opened our mouths. Yeah.
So one of the things that Alfred said this morning was we need to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I think this is a great example of how we did that at our institute. So we actually said, like, okay, we need to talk about the painful experiences of students, and you need to listen. So all the people that we invited, the students and the teachers, the professors, but also the policymakers in the institute had to come to listen to the stories of the students. So that's really important, not just for the institute, but also for the profession itself, but also for working in a city that is diverse for all our students, not just the students of color or just the white students. So the students of color can tell their stories, get empowered by telling their stories, use their voice, and the students that are Dutch or originally Dutch need to learn that they can be an ally in these topics, in these discussions, and they have to be an ally because they are, going to be a professional in that diverse city, Amsterdam. So that's one of the biggest goals of this event. So after that event, we did a lot of activities, peer learning activities. Yeah, we're wrapping it up. Peer learning activities, debates, all beautiful programs, and students told us like they really liked the programs and they felt like it helped them in their study, it motivated them in their study. And then we heard about the Students for Students campaign last year, which made it possible for us to apply for funding. And so we had this brainstorm with students, the program manager, with Mauti, like all of us together to think about how can we make all these programs part of, of the organization structure. So it needs to be embedded in the structure so that all students can benefit from this and all colleagues can work with us on these topics. So our answer is a community center within the institute. So the community center is called SEISI, which means Student Engagement and Social Impact. And all the programs that we develop with students are to work on those topics. So to get the students engaged in your community of the institute, you need to have some sense of belonging first. So we need to work on activities that, give the feeling of being at home at the university. But it's also about academic self-confidence. So we need peers to give trainings on academic skills or academic self-confidence or empowerment or talent development, all kinds of things. So to make this short, because we have to, wrap it up, it's about student engagement, social impact. All students are part of, students are part of this, are in the lead, they're the leaders of the community center, and we gave them a lot of support to do all these things. Yeah.
Yes. Ik neem mijne wel mee.
Thank you. Wow, there's so much energy in the room. It's really great to feel all the spirit of almost resistance, I would say, against the system, but also of, it is, right? It's the spirit of resistance. But also the spirit of change and, remembering what we're working for, which is to create this inclusive communities. I actually have a question that I want to ask you all, and then I'll give the room to the people in the audience to engage. And that's, we're here at a table and we're all people of color within the institutions. And you already mentioned how we need to work with white allies. And the question already earlier came up, how can you maintain this space where you're able to have these difficult conversations, but at the same time include the people who are in positions of power, who can make, who can contribute to this change. How do you see your role as a person of color and working with white allies in your own context? Who wants to respond? Is that like the most difficult question ever?
That's really difficult.
Yeah, but we can give an example, because what I learned this past year is really to develop strategic skills. Strategic skills. And first I was about, we should, fight the system and, make people feel uncomfortable and like that. But now I see this year that strategic is also sometimes being quiet and sometimes not always to speak up, but to let others speak. And example of that was our program manager, Sander Kos, who is a white heterosexual male, who is the head of our department, and he was also with ECHO. He followed a course about diversity and about inclusion, and he woke up a little bit, and that was really good. And he was like, this is very important that this subject. That people talk about this, and this is for everybody important, also for the staff and also for our students. And we really needed him to really speak up and to get the debate going on. Because if we only do it, we get a lot of backlash and, that's the group that talk about diversity. That's them. Let them do their own thing. We don't want that. We want that people join in and that they think, but this is also about me. Even if I'm white and even I didn't face any obstacles, I'm also part of this problem, but also part of the solution. And that's when we needed him to really make a bigger contribution to get more people involved. And also, it's a shame to say, but when he said it, more people listened than when I said it. and that's the harsh reality.
Can I add something to that? So one of the biggest challenges we face, I think, is that because we are, women of color, people already have this, label of everything that you say is framed in a certain way. So when I tell people that I have experienced, microaggression, or and I tell it in class, in sociology classes, I know that a lot of people think, well, that's your experience and you're subjective because, you're a woman of color, and of course you're saying that. And some people even, try to, how do you say it, like, to downplay it, but also dismiss, everything that you say because you're the one who says it. So I feel like we still need to tell people this because our experiences are really important, but we also need, a program manager saying the same thing. But it took him almost 4 years to get to this point. So I think we, invested in, having conversations with him, inviting him, for debates, but also confronting him sometimes, about things that happened in the department. And it took him 3 years or 4 years to understand a little bit where we at and what our experiences are. So it's also, it takes a lot of time, a lot of time to just, and being strategic is also part of it, to get people to the point that they listen and try to be an ally too.
Is that, and I'm looking at you, Saudi, one of the reasons why you decided to set up this course so that, because I hear in your story also a lack of awareness of what this colonial context has done to, even social relations. Is that also one of the reasons why you felt it was important to develop this course?
Yeah, and but maybe even the most important reason was this Eurocentric education system that we're having in the Netherlands right now. Going through the Dutch education system, like elementary school, high school, and that's the funny thing actually. When we're talking about making curricula more diverse, we always focus on elementary school and high school. But it's crazy that it's 2018 and that we don't have a Black Studies or ethnic studies course nowhere in the Netherlands. That's crazy. We have a history of slavery, we have a history of colonialism, we have a history of racial thought, and it's 2018 and we don't have I'm talking about a course,
not even a department.
Weeks, not even a department, not even a whole program.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say that the US is great and everything, but I had to move from the Netherlands to the US to study the history of Black people in the West.
Yeah, we need to let that sink in for a minute.
Sorry if I'm being
no,
dramatic.
No. But I mean, I think it's important. I'm glad that we can laugh about it, but really it's not funny at all.
No, it's 2018.
And I think, exactly, and I think that what we're trying to do, and that's when I get to you, Tuba, is that we're able to take these challenges head on without being overwhelmed by realizing what we're up against. So what was your strategy with Amsterdam United? Because you're in the UvA context, and we all know that was quite hectic. What was your plan of approach?
It was not my plan of approach, but I think I discussed it with the board and the former board members. And Amsterdam United also has teachers and professors attached to it. And like I said, we're doing research with the teacher education department. There's one approach that you might all recognize, but what we did is, as Amsterdam United, we have a mentor program. So we're trying to guide the first year students in academic skills, writing skills, etc. But in the meantime, if you join as a mentee to this mentor program, you also have to come up to the once a month meeting that we have, and then we're giving you some, diversity topics or inclusion topics, and then we don't say beforehand what it is. We just open up the discussion when everyone shows up. So if you say, today we're going to talk about racism, ain't nobody shows up. So you say, it's about inclusion and mentors and mentees, and then bam, I drop it. you know, you talk about the topic and then you say, but okay, you experienced it, how did that feel? Or I dropped a bomb and say homo nationalism, let's talk about it. So you just invite them in a very open way, and then when you feel safe enough, you drop the ones that you already knew, drop the topics. Another example is actually the mandatory course at the teacher department. So we're, for 7 weeks, we can teach them in anti-racist literature. The course is not called anti-racist literature. The course is called beroepsvaardigheden. Just do it easy.
Skills.
I know, because if you're just like ringing the alarm in their faces, no, ring the alarm underneath the table. You know, you have to be, I don't know, diplomatic perhaps, but changing the names or not naming them by the real names can be more inviting, because then maybe more people will step up or come to it or join in, and then slowly pinch them. But in a very positive way, in a very open way, but keep on pinching.
No, I totally recognize that, because that's also the work that we do with ECHO. You know, we try to have these conversations, but nobody wants to talk about racism and discrimination, but they do want to talk about the challenges that they face in the classroom. You know, when something happens, you know, I mean, we're heading towards November. Everyone knows that Zwarte Piet is coming up, and people want to know how to have these conversations without it escalating, and how to create inclusive classrooms. And so it is about using the language and knowing your audience, knowing what language, what concepts, what terms to use in order to engage them in the conversation. So talking about engaging in conversation, I'm looking at the audience and I'm inviting you to ask your questions or share your comments. And Max is running around with the mic. I see a lot of hands. So we'll start in the back, Max, and then work your way to the front. And please stand up so we can all see you and hear your question. Thank you.
I was wondering about what you were saying about UVA targeting specific high schools, and I was wondering, isn't that like kind of unconstitutional? Maybe, or maybe I'm exaggerating. I don't know.
Okay, maybe I should elaborate on that one because I didn't. The mentor program that we have with high schools is actually working together with UVA staff members. So we have staff members, we have the chief diversity officer, but per department you also have diversity officers. So Marike Brandt, if I have to drop her name, she is the diversity officer of the social sciences. So we work together with her as being the staff member. So we have leverage and also like, you know, the validation to do this. And then with her, we're gonna look for the high schools that we want to draw in or we want to join them. We work sometimes together with weekend colleges, so you know we can have like visibility over there as well. So it's not against the rules, if that was the question.
You were saying about the UVA that they were, you know, when they want to draw in students,
yeah,
they select certain high schools, right?
Oh, I was like, okay, I need to justify what I'm doing. Okay.
So her question is, you know,
if the UVA is not acting unconstitutional.
That's a very good question.
I mean,
I think actually because maybe one of my board members can elaborate on that, because today we had a meeting and we talked about that. And Gözde, you know I'm pointing towards you, but Gözde, you had an answer for this because it was the networking of teachers together, you said. Yeah, please elaborate. Amsterdam United board member.
I am working at the education desk at the UvA at the social science faculty, and I'm kind of like programming the voorlichtings. Are you Dutch? I don't know. Voorlichtingsdagen at high schools, and then we stumbled upon this like problem that a lot of the voorlichtingsdagen are at white high schools. So I was discussing this, and she said that the schools approaching us are mostly all white. And then I was like, okay, so we should like maybe change this up. And so we are trying to change this up, but it's not like, it was just discussed today. But I think it's not like, how do you say that, like?
A policy?
No, not like a policy, or not like a direct approach of getting high schoolers, but it's just an indirect way of how it works at UvA.
Actually, I can just comment on that, also relating to what Santi said earlier. is when we talk about institutional racism, it's never explicit, right? So they won't say we target white high schools. They say, well, we recruit students. And then they don't say we target these schools, but you just head to certain schools. Just like in the labor market, you know, no one targets white applicants, but they go to the networks where they feel is the quality of candidates. And so it's an important distinction between what is being said and what is being done, and there's a big gray area in between that allows, you know, this biased approach. And I think that is what we need to challenge, is to say, hey, wait a minute, you're only targeting white high schools, so we need to make it more inclusive because it's not being challenged. There was another question in the middle row, right? Yeah. Please stand up again.
Thank you all for your inspiring stories. It was very nice to hear. And I also have a question for Tugba, actually. Concerning the diversity officer, the chief diversity officer, there's been a lot of criticism to her appointment. And you told us that you were working closely together with her. And I was wondering, how did that go? How did you incorporate that criticism? How did you deal with that, actually?
Yeah, good question. I think when criticism is arising because of misunderstandings, misquoting, etc., a lot of things will go wrong because it booms out in the media, or it booms out at the campus, so I'm aware of that. But what happens is when we are in close contact with the chief diversity officer, so when something happens, I make an appointment, I go sit in front of her, we talk and we say, okay, what happened? Because we work together with you, our faces are also there in the media, or at least our name, so what up? And then we talk, and then you actually have a first contact. You have a face-to-face, real-life information instead of reading some information through the newspaper on my desk. So what it is actually, it has been launched. A lot of misquoting happened. So maybe this is something I shouldn't tell, but maybe you can find this, but a lot of misquoting happened. And because it's newspaper, it has to be hyped. And because it's diversity, it has to be extra hyped. So when the only resource I have is newspaper, I can't get far. But when you reach out to the person who was actually talking, you will have real answers. So I already had a talk with her. Amsterdam United already sat on table with her. And we know that I'm not sure how you can say this, as in rectifying something or maybe clarifying something, but it's up on the UVA website already, that the chief diversity officer is talking about how she has been misquoted for so many times. And then you have first-hand information instead of second-hand information. But then again, it's a very valuable topic, but I would say it's out there. It's been posted, for God's sake, yes. Good question.
Thank you. There was another question here? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. So this is kind of for the table, but I think it's mostly for you two ladies. I'm so sorry if I don't remember everyone's names. So the work that you do is to try and create an inclusive, obviously, community within the university, and you talk about reaching out to different people. I'm going to draw upon something that you said about reaching the crowd that's not necessarily, with it is not necessarily in the colored community, for a sort of outside people who wouldn't normally come to the environment, and also something that the second speaker drew upon, speaking about how his positionality as a man, how it's not always our responsibility as people of color to sort of show people. Teach people, and how people actually need to take it upon themselves. So my question is mostly about how you reach out to classes. All of you are mostly sociology majors, and I'm from an anthropology background. So how do you bring these conversations in class to physicists or economic studies? Because at the end of the day, in my experience anyway, it's in banks and science labs where this discrimination is biggest, and where these conversations are just not brought about. So, would it be an idea to have sort of a university-wide compulsory course? So how do you tackle that, essentially?
I'm going to ask you to keep it concise because we have like 5 minutes left, and there's one other question over there, so please go ahead.
It's a really good question. So the thing is that I've experienced when I talk to other professors from other departments, economics or biology, whatever, and I tell them about our experiences and what we do, they say, well, you know, you're from the social work department, so it's obvious that, you know, you talk about social issues. That's part of your professionality. But the shift that has to come is that all departments, I mean, you educate the professionals that will work in a diverse society. So in every, what you said, like in every work field, you have to, you get challenged with all kinds of topics on diversity. So all students, all professionals need to have some sort of understanding or knowledge when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So that's a thing that has to change. And we can start by, programming, training, workshops, masterclass for everyone, for every students. I think that's a good idea. But the really most challenging part is, make a part of the curriculum of economics and so that's what has to happen to make a change. But we can start by making these programs available for all students.
And I also think that we've been talking a lot about social justice, which is the basic principle, but a lot of people won't move until it hits them personally. So you can also focus on the business case, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just about being inclusive. It's about, you want to innovate, you need diversity. Do you want to encourage critical thinking? You need diversity. So bringing it into the spaces, and again using the language that people tend to be drawn by, then it becomes something that they can take ownership, from. I want to give Mohammed, right, the final question, and then we'll wrap up the night.
This question is actually related to Tuba. Well, as a kid, I actually grew up in a very diverse neighborhood, and then I went to a diverse elementary school, diverse high school. But when I had to choose to which university I had to go to, it was either for me the UvA or the VU, because I wanted to stay in Amsterdam. Can I be blunt about the reputations of these schools?
Be blunt, go ahead.
Yeah.
Be honest, be real.
Well, this was like 3 years ago, but the UvA was actually, they called it a white school, and then the VU was a colored school. And I also saw that with Amsterdam United, you try to tackle these things and also try to raise the diversity and the awareness in it. But when I went to the UvA for like a few days to see how a study was and the impression of it, I didn't feel at home at all. But when I went to the VU, I felt immediately at home. So how do you try to tackle these things for other students?
Very good question, yeah. First, I want to tell a tiny story, and then I can switch back. Yeah, I got. Let's see. I knew about this reputation when I was, done with CES VWO and I had to sign up for university. I dealt with this issue, and I also had the feeling that the UVA was white, and then the VU was more of color, And back in the days when I came out as a queer girl, I tried to, because I had the same mindset of, the people of color and my Moroccan students, my Turkish students, they're not going to accept me. I can't be myself. So if I'm queer and I want to be queer and out loud, I'm going to choose the UVA because they're all white and they don't care. But then I bumped into microaggressions and I did not know. So I specifically chose for a white area as I thought, like, I can be safe over there. Hell no, you can't be safe. So right now, instead of saying that, let me rephrase this. I think whatever the situation might be, whatever the institution might be, whatever the building might be, you can't feel unsafe, but still there are people, there are students who walk there, and I want to give them safe spaces. How do you do that? Visibility. If Amsterdam United is visible, if SACI is visible, students can still find each other and then claim their spaces, because it would be a shame because there are actually students at our university that say, well, if you want diversity and feel safe, go to the VU, leave the UvA behind. No, that's saying, like, go back to your own country. So still, it's going to be my building, it's going to be my department, it's going to be my hallway, my classroom. I'm going to claim it. With inclusivity, I'm going to claim it. So I need to be visible for a lot of students instead of saying, go to the VU. That's it.
All right. we're going to wrap up the night, and I want to thank you all for sharing your experiences, and also to the audience for your wonderful questions. This is, like I said, the 11th edition of the Wij versus Zij series, and of course Pakhuis Zwijger has so many more events coming up. You can see it on the screen, so we encourage you to come back and engage in more meaningful conversations. I invite you to continue the conversation with maybe some drinks, and I'm sure that all of our panel members and speakers are available for you to talk some more. I want to thank you all so much for coming, and a special thank you to Max for making it all happen. Thank you also to Alfred, Paulina, and Santi for sharing, for being here, and I wish you all a very good night. Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you, Bravini.